We're talking about depression earlier. There's quite a lot of evidence now that one of the reasons that men are not really getting treated for depression nearly as well is that the help men need is completely different to the help women need when they are depressed. Right?
Yes.
So they need a different solution, but quite often it's a solution that's geared towards women that is then sort of mapped onto men, and it just doesn't work very well because men need a different thing. Men need to feel competent and powerful as a result of whatever therapy they do, whereas for women it's more about being heard and unpacking certain issues and whatever. Do you know what I mean?
I do. I mean, I remember, I'm a big believer in counselling and talking therapies. You know, it took things for me to get quite bad with me where it was just the last sort of throw of the dice. But I remember the first counselling session I went for, the woman who's the therapist sort of said, you know, it's okay to feel weak. I was like, weak? What you mentioned the weak word for? Why did you mention that? I don't want to feel weak. And I was gone, you know, within not too long at all. I wanted a more, you know, like the head tilting empathy doesn't really work for me. No. So if I'm talking about sad things that happen and someone says, that must have been very tough for you. And maybe this is what's wrong with me. I don't know. Maybe I need to acknowledge it was tough, but that I just need to almost verbalise what happened because maybe I don't reflect on it as much. So a lot of the early counselling I did was just sort of narrativising things, telling the story of what happened, and then go, oh yeah, that was what I hated about that, or that was what made me angry. And eventually I found the right therapies, and it's interesting, you know, like there are a lot of blokes that are still resistant to talking therapies. I think they're a great thing to get you off the floor. I also think having done them for a lot of years, there is a point where, and this is maybe a more blokey take, that your past is just your past and you just got to suck it up a little bit.
Well, you've got to go through the process first, and that's why I'm a big fan of that stuff as well.
Yeah.
You've got to process whatever happened, but then you've got to just accept, you know, your life was your life, you're moving on, and what is it that you're going to do in the future? I think that's the path for really.
You might have to go over like dates and stuff that make you reflect. But yeah, you go, all right, that was who my parents were. These were their good things. These were the bad things. The idea that you constantly retell that story, the concept, I think, for a bloke of self-pity is an important one. The idea, the tiny violin is always there in our minds. Am I... You know, like, because we've had blokes around us that will call it out often enough. And in the book, the very last chapter is I'm talking about, you know, is it okay for men to cry in public? And my view is very much that it's better if we do in private, which sounds really toxic. But I have a good cry regularly, but I just think that that's where I can do it properly. The problem is the process of there being witnesses to my tears changes the function of it. Right, and also I just think men don't cry as often statistically, so that when we do it, we're not match fit, so we look horrific. Like, have you seen like it just looks awful? It's like this fucking Hulk-like metamorphosis. Whereas, you know, I think, you know, the women I've known in my life, like my mum could cry and like still fold clothes, you know. So there's definitely a different ability there, and I think that male tears hold a different status in society. So Novak Djokovic cried after his Wimbledon final defeat, right?
It's nice to see my son still there, still smiling, you know. Sorry. I love you. Thank you for supporting me, and I'll give you a big hug, and we can all love each other. Thank you.
Novak Djokovic, ladies and gentlemen.
Something within him broke, and we're like, that's wonderful. You know, this strong guy, this athlete that's got all the way, he's earned this. But if he cried like that after the quarterfinal, we'd be like, okay, mate, you know, it's a bit much. Yeah, just get back to the locker room. Somebody put a towel over his head, and you could say that is toxic or anything, but it's always, that's really, you know, I don't think you can completely ignore the base reasons why that emotional impulse exists in the first place. So again, it's like you say with counselling, it's working with what is there in blokes, really. And what is there in blokes is different, and the language of therapy can sometimes seem a bit alien.